Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. This is kind of an old story. It happened back in the late 1970s, as will be revealed by a few things that come up within. I just thought I should mention that so no one wonders why I didn't call on my cell phone or something like that. Back then, the closest thing most people had to a cell phone was on the wall of a building, and you had to feed quarters to it to even use it. When I was 16, I didn't really have a lot of friends. I spent a lot of my time walking around town. In the surrounding area, there was an old train yard that I liked to explore. It was especially nice in the fall when it would be cool outside. I'd throw on my jacket and just go out and explore and have fun. It was the fall of 1978 that I had gotten up the courage to explore an old abandoned hospital just on the outskirts of town. It wasn't like a sanitarium or anything crazy like that, at least not to my knowledge. It was just an old hospital that closed down in the 60s sometime. It was fenced and gated off, of course, and they had plenty of no trespassing signs on it, but it wasn't really a challenge to get inside. The only thing that was a challenge was gathering up the nerve to go ahead and do it, and I had no idea what the police would have done if they caught me. If anything, I finally convinced myself to do it when I told myself it made no sense the police would be hanging around there anyway. I mean, why would they? I got over the gate easily and snuck in the first time. I actually didn't go into the hospital itself. I just kinda explored the grounds. Although I had overcome my nerves regarding entering the property, I hadn't overcome them in regards to breaking into the building itself. There was a big old fountain right up front, covered in moss and other green gunk. I tossed some rocks into it while waiting around. Making my way around the back, I discovered an old park area. There were various things like slides and swing sets left lying around. I tried to swing on one of the swings, fell, and hurt my ass, of course. After poking around a little more, I left. About a week later, I came back. I decided I was going to try and find a way inside. It was boarded up pretty damn tight, and many of the windows had bars on them as well. I wasn't able to break in this initial time, so I just left again. The following week, though, I came back with some tools to aid me. I was determined to get into that hospital. Somehow, I was able to, after much effort and various cuts on my hands, pry off some of the bars covering one of the windows. I then used a hammer to break it open and smash all the glass off, and was finally able to slide in. Being inside the hospital was a very creepy experience. It was, of course, very dark in many places, and I had to carry a flashlight around with me. The higher floors, which I also visited, were not as dark, though. That part was actually pretty well lit because the floors and stairs were all still solid. I was able to find my way around quite easily and safely. I explored a lot of the old rooms. To my surprise, many of them still had old and really rusted, worn-out equipment, nothing like needles or anything like that, but various wheelchairs and gurneys. I was pretty excited. At one point, I went ahead and tried to ride a wheelchair down a wheelchair ramp. Didn't work out so well. The wheel got caught on some debris, and I was propelled forward and onto the floor of the ramp, scuffing myself up quite badly. It was while I was lying there on the ramp that I could have sworn I heard someone laughing. It immediately sent a chill down my spine. Although I couldn't be sure, I figured it was better to get out as quickly as possible. I walked back to the room that had the window I had broken, feeling like I was being watched the entire time. I rushed out, constantly looking behind me. I almost expected someone to grab my leg from behind while I was going through the window, but nobody did. I hurried off the grounds and swore to myself I would not go back there ever. As you can imagine, that promise didn't exactly last very long. I came back a scant 6 weeks later. My experience had done enough to scare me into not coming back for a while, but not permanently. I convinced myself I had just imagined the laughing and that I had simply psyched myself out. I had been around most of the hospital that day after all and had not seen any indication that someone else might have possibly been there. There was no way anyone could have gotten into the building. Anyway, it had taken me forever, and I didn't see any other exposed entrances or anything. I got back in through my regular window and began to explore other parts of the building. I had completely gotten over my apprehension at this point. It was when I walked into what I assumed to be an operating room, because there was an operating table there, that I got the chill of my life. Plastered all over the walls were hundreds of Polaroid pictures. The vast majority were of people I had never seen before. But on one of the opposite walls, there were at least 20 of me. I saw pictures of me out by the fountain, me tossing a rock into it, me on my ass when I fell off the swing. I saw a picture of me on the ramp when I had fallen off the wheelchair. The pictures were not of great quality, obviously taken without flashes while hiding, but I could make out they were definitely of me. I've never before, nor since, been as freaked out as I was in that moment. I'll just admit it, I wasn't just freaked out. I was scared shitless. I turned and surveyed the hallway. I made my way back to my entrance window. Every step was a nightmare. Walking by every door, I expected someone to grab me and pull me in. Every sound caused me to jump out of my skin, and by the time I made it to the exit, I could admit I was nearly in tears out of pure terror. The process of going out the window was terrible, too. I had to keep looking behind me. I made it out and made it over the fence. Finally, and there came the scariest part. I had just made it over the fence when I got a sudden feeling and looked back at the hospital. There was a person standing right next to the fountain looking at me. He had a Polaroid camera in his hands, and he took my picture. Did I tell my parents? No, of course not. Did I call the police? What good would that have done? I was trespassing. As far as I know, the guy might have owned the place, or perhaps been the groundskeeper or something. I had no proof he was an intruder. I also would have had to admit to both my parents and the police that I had broken the law by trespassing and shattering a window. So, in my mind, I couldn't tell anybody. My only solace was that there was no way this man could have known who I was or where I lived. Afterwards, I never went back to that hospital, just to be safe. This story doesn't have any surprise twists in it. It doesn't have any people who are secretly watching me or anything like that, but it was pretty damn terrifying all on its own. My brother happens to work in a morgue. He would never bring it up in conversation and insisted there was nothing scary about working there. I always told people where he worked, and they would get really excited, assuming he had some scary stories to tell, but everything he talked about was very mundane and always boring. He always insisted nothing scary ever happened in a morgue. One weekend, I decided to make something scary happen. I snuck into the morgue. Now, other people are not supposed to go in there, but I still did. It wasn't even that difficult to do. Honestly, I knew when my brother was working and when he was going to be out for lunch for at least an hour. Do you ever see those movies where people eat in morgues? Gross. I knew my bro never did that. My ingenious idea was to go into one of the cabinets, slide myself on top of one of the corpses, and close it. Gross, right? I thought it would be fine because the corpse was covered in a very heavy apron of some sort. When it opened, I would scream at my brother and make him mess his pants. It would be worth it to be that close to a dead body for just a little while. It's not like they're that different from a live person, just very still. They don't have secret germs or cooties or anything like that. I won't lie, it wasn't easy to cram myself inside. There wasn't a whole lot of extra room, and closing myself in was difficult as hell. Pushing the platform back in and getting the cabinet door shut from the inside was almost impossible. It took me so long, I assumed my brother or someone else would make it back before I was done, but they didn't. I closed myself in and waited for the moment I was going to scare the hell out of my bro. I waited. I heard him come in, and I prepared myself, but he didn't open the cabinet. I could hear him moving around, working, but he didn't open it. Actually, I didn't hear him open any cabinets. He was definitely moving around there, though. I figured a good joke was worth a little wait. Hell, I had already been lying there for a little while. Was it gonna hurt me to lay there much longer? So I laid there and waited. And waited. It must have been 2 hours or something, at least in my mind. Then I suddenly felt something. The corpse I was lying on moved its arm. I didn't even care about my joke anymore. At that point, I began screaming and banging on the damn walls of the cabinet. It didn't take long before my brother opened it up, obviously very startled. I jumped out immediately and began brushing myself off. I don't know why I did that. It was like a reflex or something. My brother was both angry and confused. I kept yelling that the body was alive or something, and he wasn't understanding me. When I calmed down, I explained it better, and he laughed at me. He laughed at me when I was supposed to be the one playing a joke on him. He then explained to me that the smaller muscles of a dead body, although extremely rarely, can, on occasion, move by themselves. He told me I should feel very fortunate because, in his entire career, he had only ever seen that happen one time. I'd experienced a once-in-a-lifetime thing? Yeah, why couldn't I have won the lottery or something? That's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. No, I had to hide on a dead body and feel it move by itself. At least my brother finally had an interesting morgue story to tell. Now, though, he always tells the story about how his dumbass brother nearly crapped his pants lying on top of a corpse that just so happened to move. This is a story that happened when I was in the hospital about 15 years ago. Well, I wasn't in the hospital myself. I was at the hospital a lot, though, visiting my boyfriend. Yes, I am gay, and this is very important to the story. I'm sure it had a lot to do with what happened. My boyfriend at the time had been in a head-on collision. I'll never forget when I heard about it. My body went numb, and I even blacked out for a moment. Seeing him in the ICU in a coma was just so bizarre. It was almost like he wasn't even my boyfriend, like whatever made him Jamie was just gone. I'm not even sure if I'm explaining it correctly. It was just so odd to see him like this. I was allowed to spend time with him in the ICU because I was his medical proxy. His family was severely homophobic, and we worried that something like this might happen. He knew his family would never let me in to see him, so he'd filled out the paperwork, and our attorney filed it. It was established that I had full control over the situation. I, in fact, could even keep his family from seeing him if I wanted to. I'm not that kind of person, though, so his family was free to visit as often as they wanted, as long as I was made aware of the situation. My control over the matter did not sit well with his mom. Of course, Jamie and his mom had never gotten along anyway. She would raise hell with the doctors about how Jamie was her son and I was just the slur boyfriend. Yes, she used the term. I was not a true member of the family. They had better get her consent, not mine, and update her first on everything. At first, this was barely an inconvenience. I was willing to put up with it. I thought Jamie would have liked his mom to be there. Eventually, though, the doctors told me that her fighting with them so much, in front of Jamie, no less, was a huge distraction, and the stress was affecting Jamie negatively. I tried to talk to her, but there's no talking to that woman. I tried to be nice and let her know I wanted her to be able to see her son. He had signed me in as his medical proxy. I was legally in control of the situation, and that was not going to change, no matter how much she complained. She needed to quit arguing with the doctors and let them do their job. Oh yeah? Well, why don't you just get AIDS and die, you stupid? Jamie's mom sneered at me and called me a slur. That was it. I had been patient. I had been nice, way beyond the expectations of anyone who would have been in my situation. I had her removed immediately. It was terrible. She yelled and screamed and called me and the doctors all sorts of slurs. She carried on about how I was going to hell, converting her son, and making him into a, she was removed by security, actually the police. 2 nights later, I was leaving the hospital, heading for the hotel I was staying at. All of a sudden, I noticed some guy who had been sitting on the couch in the waiting area almost all day get up to follow me. He was big and dressed all in camouflage. He walked out behind me and into the parking garage. I was worried it might be a friend of Jamie's mom. I was confident, though, that he would at least not try to do anything to me in the hospital. There were cameras and police officers all around, after all. I made it to my car and got in. It didn't take long at all before a pickup truck pulled up behind me as I was leaving the garage. Not only was it sitting awfully high, but the truck had its high beams on, too, annoying as hell. I left the parking garage and turned left. The truck followed me. At first, I thought it was nothing to worry about. You had to turn left or right anyway, so it was a 50-50 chance. When I made it to a red light, I flipped on my turn signal. Immediately, the truck turned on the same signal. I tried to put it out of my head until the exact same thing happened at the next light, and again and again. I debated back and forth in my head whether this was just being made up or if this guy was really following me. I turned on my right signal when I was supposed to make a left turn. The truck turned on their signal as well. I turned left instead, though, and the truck switched their signals and followed me. No doubt, they were tailing me. I made a turn I didn't have to make, and they still turned with me. In fact, I went in a complete circle, and they followed me the whole way. I was terrified. I didn't even live in this city. Jamie had been airlifted there, and that's why I was staying in a hotel. I didn't know anyone other than the people in the hospital. I also didn't know where the police station was. I had no idea what to do but to keep driving. It was very late, past midnight, so there were not a lot of places or parking lots I could pull into where I could get help. I mean, there were lots, but they were all empty. None of that mattered, though. When I was feeling most frantic, I came to another red light and stopped. The truck, instead of stopping, ran right into me. My car died immediately. I was startled and scared out of my mind. I'd been wearing my seatbelt, thankfully, and hadn't been injured. The pickup wasn't hurt as badly as my now stalled car. Thankfully for me, the fucker just drove off. I figure what happened is Jamie's mom must have had this guy ram into me in the hopes I would be hospitalized or something. Then she could control her son's medical situation. Maybe that's why the guy waited for me and followed me for so long, getting up the nerve to actually do it. Maybe he was going to attack me, but decided I wasn't going to get out of the car and figured ramming me was a good idea. Well, it wasn't for him. The man was caught. He was Jamie's mom's cousin. Of course, he went to jail for a hit and run, as I couldn't prove it was premeditated. Yes, he had been following me, but I had no evidence. His mother swore up and down that she had nothing to do with it, but nobody believed her. Jamie cut her out of his life completely when he recovered. It's been 15 years, and we haven't heard from her at all. It was Jamie's decision, not mine, and we're still happily together today. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.